Welcome back, it's PapaTraffy, and let's jump right into Ranger Reject 144 today. This chapter is mostly a step back from all of the action, which I know a lot of people wanted, myself included. The entire first half of the chapter is basically telling me that Usakubo might be a bigger fan of D than me. It starts off with Usakubo bringing in another dragon gadget that she had repaired, which means that D has two now. They do begin talking about a third one, hinting at a three-sword style D, which I don't think will happen, but it was a pretty funny gag. There's one other small point I want to talk about from the first half of this chapter, but it really does just focus on Usakubo glazing D. It's all compliments. She doesn't have a single negative thought in her head about him, even fantasizing about the fact that they're technically living together, getting a nosebleed when she starts thinking about getting a bed for them to share. She's turned into your old man pervert character, or Sanji, but only for D, which makes it less creepy. This is the first time since the time skip that we've gotten any meaningful time with Usakubo, and it's nice to see that she's relatively the same, if not a bit more open. We find out that she's on the run from the Rangers still, but Chidori has been supporting her, which is how she got an apartment. We all know he said he was broke, but he absolutely isn't if he's able to provide a place for someone else in this economy. This part of the chapter ends, however, with D clarifying information that I had previously stated in my character analysis for Suzukiri. He tells Usakubo that it's hard to talk to her in a different way than Suzukiri. Usakubo asks if Suzukiri is another one of his sympathizers, and D states that she was his enemy and his accomplice. Yes, this wasn't from Suzukiri's mouth, but D was able to acknowledge their relationship for what it was. They weren't friends by any means. She just used him to attain her goal and tossed him aside when he was no longer needed. You could look into this deeper though. She is the literal embodiment of his enemy. Suzukiri and her entire clan are what allows the Dragon Keepers to permanently kill the foot soldiers. She is their most natural enemy. With that though, we switch over to continue our talk between Suzukiri and Chidori. This part of the chapter proves one of my theories from the 143 chapter discussions correct, but we'll talk about that in a bit. There's a stage that we focus on shortly though, with Chidori asking what it's for, Suzukiri only saying that it's for a very important ritual but has since lost its meaning. Chidori, more than just asking, but showing how much he knows, asks if it's for the ritual of divine descent from the Suzukiri clan. This could have multiple meanings. What is the purpose of that ritual? Divine descent in some religions is described as when God comes down to give order back to the material world. Just as water naturally flows downward, the material world naturally gravitates towards disorder. This divine descent is meant to correct that. The other meaning you could take from this is more literal. This ritual is how they would continue the Suzukiri bloodline, being blessed by the dragon gods. We have no way to confirm which one it currently is, but if you have any ideas, feel free to let me know. Suzukiri asks Chidori how much he really knows. Chidori only says that he knows the true purpose of the dragon priestesses and who Suzukiri really is. Suzukiri just calls him a liar. This is interesting though. Suzukiri didn't expect him to know the information he did, which means there are keepers who aren't in the know. They are left out. Of course, we've seen this with other bits of information, but you'd expect the other keepers to know what Sosei knew, right? The fact that their weapons are made from the dragon priestesses seems to be something that only red and yellow know. At least that's what this part of the chapter makes it look like. Suzukiri basically says that she's giving up, and Chidori asks about D, telling her that he's still fighting like his life depends on it. This is the theory that I was talking about. Suzukiri won't help Chidori because she's given up on fighting the Rangers. She has something more to live for. Chidori asks even if it's at the cost of his divine weapon, which she says yes, quickly disappears behind a corner and then attacks him, now discovering that Suzukiri has both Blue's weapon and Red's, which we already knew she had reds. Chidori tells her that he can't give it to her, but swears that he'll put an end to this deranged show, that he won't let anyone else be sacrificed, which his phrasing is what's important here, letting us know how much he really knows. I'll put an end to this deranged show can point towards his knowledge of the Rangers previously being a part of a show, as well as knowledge of the Phantom script, which he would know about because of Sanai. Not wanting anyone else to be sacrificed points me to Chidori being here for the sake of revenge. 2 chapters ago, he met up with Sosei Momiji. Obviously, he would have learned about the death of Sanai, someone who was close to him. The next chapter, he goes to find Suzukiri in order to team up to defeat the Dragon Keepers. Chidori is absolutely out for blood. This leads us into Usako and D watching Hisui on TV, as she was chosen to speak with the media about the Neo Rangers, and to even compete against them. This part is pretty funny since it's a bunch of rehearsed lines from Hisui and not suitable for television attitude, but we all knew it was coming. That's just who Hisui is. Hisui has to compete in a race against General 3, or Runa from the Neo Rangers. Runa expresses disinterest as she wanted to race against the Dragon Keeper, and this makes Hisui mad. I honestly think Runa's going to win just because she has portals. I can already see that happening, making the Rangers look bad, which probably won't be a good thing for Hisui. D, however, hears a noise and, copying his inspiration, jumps out of the window in the coolest transition into his human form ever and talks to a man nearby. The man lets him know that a robbery is happening and it's a stray foot soldier that is doing it. The chapter ends. Holy crap. How is D going to handle going up against another foot soldier? The entire reason that he's fighting. Now, to be fair, the foot soldiers who have been up in the fortress haven't had any real interest in going off script. Maybe his speech from after the time skip shook them up, so they're trying to live better lives for themselves. It could honestly just be a normal human in a foot soldier costume, or we may get XX back in the story, as this seems like something she would do, to be honest. I will say though, if this is another foot soldier from up in the fortress, this is going to be a big character moment for D. How he handles the situation as a ranger and as an invader, where people can see him, is going to say a lot about how he's changed as a character and his goals. We'll have to wait for the next chapter to find out. Volume 15 is really starting off with a bang. Ranger Reject 145 is finally here. It's time to hop in and discuss what happened this chapter, and let me tell you, it is wild. There's one part that's really strange about this chapter, but we'll talk about it when we get there. As we know though, 144 ended with D going after a foot soldier trying to rob a bank. I had a few theories in regards to this, but it looks like all of mine were wrong. It was a foot soldier, but he definitely wasn't trying to live his best life. The beginning of this chapter is pure comedy though. We get to see how little foot soldiers actually know about the real world, and the whole interaction with the bank teller was just gold. The way the bank teller just doesn't care that they're getting robbed is just the perfect example of your everyday person who simply does not care. Of course though, this humor doesn't last too long as D finally makes his arrival. Just as a quick reminder, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, as it really helps the video out in the algorithm and I'd really appreciate it. Feel free to join the Discord, that will be linked below as well. I'll have separate channels for talking about the untranslated raws that drop, and then another one to talk about the chapter when we get the translations. As Foot Soldier S runs away, D confirms that it is a foot soldier from up in the fortress. He's just trying to figure out why it's robbing a bank. He does seem to suspect something is going on, and we're gonna learn in a very unfortunate way that this is the case. D and Usako chase the foot soldier into a stairwell and trap him there. D transforms back in order to calm down the foot soldier, but the foot soldier disappears, saying something very strange. "I don't want to die. I can't do this. Everyone, I'm sorry." D quickly recognizes the weirdness of this statement and says that the Rangers are definitely up to something, that S was threatened to rob the bank. But why? Right at that moment, we get a close-up of the Yellow Keeper saying that it's time to get started, and then we see Hisui's divine replica at work. There's a lot to this. It means that Yellow definitely knows who D is and who he's with. He would have had to have known D's location in order to send a foot soldier close enough that he would be the first to arrive. He also has to know D's motivations fairly well to know that he'd transform out of his disguise to calm the nerves of a fellow foot soldier. Remember, this is all information he's learned about D based off of one encounter during the three-way battle. That's crazy attention to detail and an even crazier plan to try to pull off. D finally notices Hisui though and starts to wave at her, but stops as he sees a drone camera behind her. D is definitely confused as to why Hisui is there, since she was supposed to be having the race with the Neo Rangers. Hisui also doesn't know that it's D yet either though. D dashes into someone's home and turns on the news to confirm what's going on, and we get the terrible reveal. The 100-meter race was canceled, but now they're racing to see who can take out the foot soldier first. that brings us back to the talk between Yellow and the producers of the show. This was 100% planned. However, was it planned to lure out D, or was S supposed to just be who they were chasing after? Maybe. Yellow doesn't really know. D leaves the house to run away, but Hisui is already on top of him, with D calling out to her and Hisui finally realizing who it is. The worst has yet to come though. We see that Runa wasn't far behind Hisui as she releases her divine tool. I just want to stop and talk about that divine tool for a second though. The symbols that are located on their left arm I had previously assumed was how they equip their suits. It is in fact their divine weapon though, which means that D may really be in trouble here. Hisui tries to stop Runa by saying this is a different invader, and Runa just replies by saying they all look the same to her. Which is strange to say the least. You would assume that the Neo Rangers are a bit more considerate of the foot soldiers due to Sakurama, but that doesn't appear to be the case here. They seem to be operating off of their individual goals, I'd have to assume based off of Runa's interaction. Here's the really strange part that I was talking about earlier though. Hisui looks into the portal that Runa came out of and her eyes get wide, saying, wait, your D gets stabbed by Runa's divine tool, and then Hisui screams out Saku before it gets cut off. We'll come back to my assumptions in a moment though for this part since the chapter is almost over. With D heavily injured, Runa says that she guessed that means she wins, and we get a quick scene of Yellow saying not yet. And the news broadcaster says that she hasn't won yet. She needs to finish off D. And the chapter ends with Yellow Keeper saying, fight on, fight on. As I said, crazy chapter. Crazy start to this volume as a whole. Let's make some assumptions though. At first glance, Hisui screaming out Saku before getting cut off looks like she's calling out for D and cut herself off in order to not give him away. But the wait, you're immediately before makes me believe that she saw Sakurama in the portal. This doesn't make sense though. She tucked the portal from the roof to where D and Hisui were. So how would Sakurama get there? Who did Hisui see in the portal? Or it could have been completely unrelated to that portal and she was about to announce that Runa was technically an invader herself. Let me know what you think. As we went through this chapter, I went back and forth on if I believed Yellow knows who D is, and I'm pretty sure he does. I'm pretty sure that he knows exactly who D is and where he was. How? Because of the dragon gadget that Wendy gave him. I can definitely see Yellow putting some form of tracking tech in the dragon gadget to monitor D's location, and this is how he knew where to send S. This was definitely all a part of his plan to take out D and possibly make the Green Battalion look bad, since they seem to be shaping up as his main opposition. This is just multi-layered at this point, and I feel like it's only going to get wilder. That's all for chapter 145 though. I know it's been a minute since we last talked, so let's catch up real quick. As you should know, we had a week break on Ranger Reject, and 145 dropped last week, but we didn't get a translation for it until Sunday. I give all the praise to the translators though. Y'all are the best, and I appreciate y'all. Take whatever time you need. We respect y'all around these parts. An all-out war is coming. Chapter 146 of Ranger Reject seems to be the beginning of something much larger. The Neo Rangers and the Ranger Force are mobilizing, and D seems to be trapped in the middle. All while the Yellow Keeper appears to be planning everything from behind the scenes. So let's really dive into why 146 is such an important chapter and how this is going to lead into a battle bigger than the three-way battle. But you know what's even bigger than that? Hitting that like and subscribe button. Every bit helps spread knowledge of this amazing series by making this video more visible in the algorithm. And if you want a place to talk about Ranger Reject or manga in general, feel free to join my Discord, which will be linked below. Back on topic though, Ranger Reject 146 begins with a meeting between the Neo Rangers. It does seem like most of them are somewhat aware of who D is, as they show concern for his well-being. Also complaining about Runa using her invader powers, which she definitely wasn't supposed to be using on live TV. Something that will come back to bite her in a minute. Also, something that I think will jumpstart this whole war between the Ranger Force and the Neo Rangers. Sakurama appears concerned for D, and Urabe seems to be catching on. At this point, Urabe has to know that the Sakurama that he was in Beilong's nest with wasn't the same one that he's with now. So I expect that Sakurama has already told him who D really is. I think this will lead us into having a very nice Urabe and D moment where they get to actually talk to each other without hiding anything. But Sakurama has decided it's time to head out, and I'm assuming it's for the sole reason of protecting D, or at least I'd hope that would be the case. With the next page, we see that Hisui is now actively attacking Runa, and it looks like in 145 it was Hisui realizing who exactly this Neo Ranger was. An executive who had previously attacked Hisui and left a scar on her face in the three-way battle, something that you may not remember. This brings me back to what I mentioned earlier though. If the broadcast didn't pick up on their conversation, Hisui's going to have to explain why she attacked the Neo Ranger and defended an invader. Her only option would be to out who Runa is. This would inform the public that executives are a part of the Neo Rangers, turning people against them. During their fight though, D is able to escape and the media tells everyone to be careful and keep an eye out for him. The blue squad is mobilizing, red is trying to figure out where Tokita went, and pink just seems out of the loop. On top of that, Shippo is missing and Sosei is invited to help by Sakurama but firmly turns it down. A lot of people are expecting him to still show up though. It would be the perfect chance for him to fight against the people who did this to him. We switch back over to D, where it looks like Tokita and Hekaru both have found him in his weakened state. They both start attacking him, but the important part here is Tokita. He says, "I bet you feel that way too, foot soldier." Why is this important? Because the first step to becoming a part of Team D is to sympathize with him. And that's exactly what Tokita is doing here. Everybody, say welcome to the team, Tokita. Because I'm sure he'll be switching sides soon, especially once he realizes that Sakurama has been helping D. Tokita fires off a shot though, and while it looks like D is backed into a corner, Usakubo hops in and saves him. That's my goat right there. I knew she'd show up to save our boy D. There was no way they were going to show her so often for the beginning of this volume and not have her get active. After Tokita announces who she is, Hekaru realizes that she was a member of the IRA and goes into attack. In absolutely no time at all, Usakubo puts him through a wall and he's out of the fight. Can I just point out that there is nothing that Negi loves more than giving Hekaru the crap end of the stick every time? Like, I don't think this man has ever had a good fight or been made to look good in a fight. I get it though, screw Hekaru. That man is a pest. As I expected though, Usakubo still has access to her divine tool, but it looks like we're getting a bit more information about it. Like the fact that if she overuses it, she goes temporarily blind. I think this is an important bit of information to keep in mind as we move forward. We switch over to the media discussing what happens, and then we get to see Aizome for the first time since the three-way battle, and she is not looking good. She also knows that D and Usakubo are running through the city, and the chapter ends. Wow. There is so much going on in just this chapter alone. What's going to happen next? Will D be okay? Where is Shippo? Find out in the next chapter of Ranger Reject. But no, to be honest here, there's so many factions forming, and it looks like a few of them could team up. First, we have D and Usakubo, and by extension, the Green Battalion. I say by extension because while Hisui likes D, she hasn't shown any disloyalty towards the Ranger Force. But knowing that executives are in the Neo Rangers, she probably won't like them. Chidori is looking to team up with Suzukiri to take down the Ranger Force and would probably side with the Neo Rangers because of Sosei and Momiji. Then you have the Neo Rangers, who, while being led by Sakurama, will probably defend D. Then you have Sosei, who hates the Ranger Force and doesn't seem to care for much else. Tokita might switch sides once he realizes who Sakurama is, and then you have Aizome, who's only going to be out for blood. Let's not forget the Yellow Keeper, who seems to be the mastermind behind everything either. There are so many moving parts happening in this arc that it makes it extremely hard to predict anything that might happen. The next chapter of Ranger Reject, I can almost guarantee, will be the start of a huge battle. Ranger Reject 147 is here, and wow, this was an action-packed chapter. The one thing I've definitely noticed in regards to Negi though, even the most action-based chapters are filled to the brim with information that's super important to the plot. It never fails, and chapter 147 is no different. Like, what's going on with the Death Messiah? How is Urabe going to actually react to D? Well, let's jump in and talk about it. As always though, if you enjoy Ranger Reject, why not like the video and subscribe? I make these chapter discussions for each chapter, and I do character analysis videos for Ranger Reject characters. Chapter 147 starts with D hiding out, trying to find the best way out of the situation while everyone is still looking for him. The interesting part about this is that he's having a semi-discussion with himself to figure out what to do next. But it isn't necessarily with himself, labeled as his heart's death messiah. This is who D is discussing his plans with on what to do next. This has me interested though. Is this just a way to label D's internal monologue, or is this a part of the death messiah that's still within him? This is the first that we're seeing of him, and the options he suggests seems to be in direct contradiction with D as a character and D's actual thoughts. So it's a bit strange to assume this is strictly just D talking to himself. An incident does occur later in the chapter that I think might influence what happens next with this. If this is how the Death Messiah hangs around from now on, I'm fine with that. He seems to now hold the role of D's self-preservation, and it'll be nice to see that. Basically, he suggests the best ways for D to escape, none of which D actually thinks will work. The first is to form a disguise, which D can't do at the moment because of his wounds. The second is to return to the Sky Fortress, which he can't do because of the Blue Battalion. And the third is to ride the air currents to escape. D also refuses this. He turns down this option because this is the third time he's been in pretty much this exact situation, and we all know what happens with that. Let's look back to when Sakurama saved him from Hikaru. D came back just to save Sakurama, and this is probably what that thought process looked like minus the Death Messiah. But in this case, it's Hisui and Usakubo who are protecting him. We then move over to Noa, who's being told where D currently is. She complains about going after him because it's her day off, which, so real, I feel that. But she's told that Dragon Keepers don't get days off and that she has to actually suit up. She brings up the fact that the TV crew will be there and that she'd rather die than be on camera, which, as we'll soon come to learn, it's pretty close to the truth. This seems to be a pretty big part of her character, which I think has a pretty easy resolution. While she may be the Pink Keeper, while she's in the suit, no one can actually see her. I think she'll eventually come to terms with that, and it'll help her resolve her stage fright issue. We jump back to D, who has now left the alley he was hiding in as he narrowly avoids being discovered by two members of the Ranger Force. He makes his way to a bridge that's currently closed and under construction. D wonders if he should just swim to avoid the construction, but through the Death Messiah, we learn that apparently water poses a bigger risk to invaders. I don't think this is indicating that the invaders are weak to water in any way. I just think it's saying that the foot soldiers don't have any advantages to being in the water. So if he was discovered while there, it wouldn't be good for him. D, however, takes that advice and tries to conjure up his normal human disguise. Obviously, by the earlier discussion, it's not possible to make it fully convincing, but it works well enough for the most part. As he gets to the other side of the bridge, he realizes that there's a line of Red Rangers who are trying to search the bridge, but the workers aren't letting them through. Out of all of them though, Rinrin, one of the now Red Rangers who was an unranked ranger with D, notices him. Whether it's the fact that she notices his disguise, or just the fact that he's suspicious, we don't know yet. As D's face begins to crack more, an old man thinks he's just sick and tries to get him to a hospital. Looks like it's more of a liability reason than just being a kind Samaritan though. As they pass through the Red Rangers, we get another weird look from Rinrin, but it doesn't appear that she's caught on yet. Switching back to Noa, we get a conversation between her and Intan. Before we talk about that though, I do want to point out that yes, this chapter does keep flipping back and forth between the perspective of D and Noa. I honestly feel like Negi is continuing to set her up as a more and more important character. We'll just have to see where he takes that. In this conversation though, we find out that Noah still hasn't undergone the compatibility surgery, so she still isn't able to utilize divine weapons, only replicas. Because of that, Intan has to use her divine tool in order to find D's location, similar to what she did to find Shigeoka in a previous chapter. With that though, they're able to find D, and Noah speeds off in a flash, pulling him off of the old man and getting ready to finish him off until she notices the camera there. This causes her to freeze due to her stage fright, and D is once again able to escape. As he's running away though, the leg that the Death Messiah gave him gets shot off and he falls into a canal. I'll go ahead and mention it now, but we do not see him recover his leg in this chapter. This is what I meant towards the beginning of the chapter though. If that was the Death Messiah talking to him, it would mean that now he's separated from him. So, is that inner monologue just going to disappear in the same chapter that it started? I don't think so. I think the secret weapon that the Death Messiah mentioned when he gave him the leg is going to activate soon. At the moment though, I see it more as a better heal. What's the best thing the Death Messiah could give him? Healing. Now I know he's already got that, but hear me out. Being able to heal blows from divine weapons would be a huge power boost for D outside of just getting stronger. It also feels like something that Negi would do for D as a character. Moving on from that though, Rinrin chases D into the canal, but we see that Shippo is already there about to deliver the final blow. Rinrin immediately recognizes the voice, but before either of them can deliver the final blow to D, he hears a voice telling him to roll into the water. The chapter ends with the boat speeding away, and we get to see the long-awaited reunion between Urabe and D. To point at his final line though, I see this as a two-part message. Urabe says, "It's been a while, foot soldier D," which obviously the last time they actually met up was in the Green Keeper arc when D was with Suzukiri going after the Green Keeper. But I do think that Urabe has figured out that this is who he got to know during Beilong's Nest. I'm curious to see how this goes, and to be fair, this is definitely a part of Sakurama's plan. Runa was a part of the game, so she didn't know not to go after D. Shippo had left before he could get information from Sakurama. So everyone else who was there has probably been instructed to protect D, or at least I hope that's the case. For the first time though, I'm actually stumped for where this might go next. Will the Ranger Force continue to chase D as they have to try to make their escape? Is this the point where D defects to the Neo Rangers? I don't think that's the case, but I guess we'll have to find out in the next chapter, because at this point, I have no idea. Chapter 148 is here, and Foot Soldier on the Run is going into its fourth part. This chapter was incredible. It starts off by going back to the battle between Hisui and Runa, with Hisui getting increasingly more and more frustrated as Runa dodges her attacks by hopping through portals. Runa quickly turns the tables though by sending a transmission tower through her portal right on top of Hisui. As Runa thinks she's won and that she's going to leave, Hisui, using her old deadly weapon in the mouth trick, spits a knife through the portal, stabbing Runa in the shoulder. This is one of those moments that shows experience versus raw power. Runa got ahead of herself because she thought she had won, and it left an opportunity for Hisui to attack her through her own ability. Unfortunately, as it looks like Hisui is about to win, Sakurama and 3 other Neo Rangers show up. Although Suzanne is looking really angry here, I don't think this is for any particularly negative reason. I could see it going one of 2 ways. The first is that Sakurama is here to stop the fight, saving Runa while letting Hisui know where D will be. We'll talk more about that as we get further into the chapter though. The second is that maybe Sakurama is trying to separate D from the Green Battalion to further the chances of recruiting him. That's another topic that we'll address later on though. From here, we switch over to the fight between Usakubo and Tokita. Funnily enough, it looks like Hikaru is really down for the count. That bum can't catch a break. A television is playing the news in the background referring to D, and Usakubo gets distracted. As they announce that D is gone, both Usakubo and Tokita stop fighting to watch as they show D on the boat from the last chapter. It's a relatively quick segment. From here though, we really get into the depth of this chapter, which comes from the conversation between D and Urabe. A conversation that I've been waiting for a long time. Urabe does in fact know that the Sakurama from Beilong's nest was D. Urabe is asked if he's getting sentimental, and he responds by saying that an invader wouldn't know anything about that, but follows up with his own question. During the Green Keeper arc, why was D going to let him live? Urabe's entire character arc has revolved around his preconceived notions of the invaders. He assumed that they were all bad because that's what he was taught. This idea began to crumble when he found out that an invader had saved Ranmaru during Beilong's nest. It began to fall apart even faster when D didn't want to end him. I'd assume upon learning that D was Sakurama during Beilong's nest caused it to shatter altogether. At this moment though, he's being inquisitive. He's asking questions out of confusion, trying to challenge his own worldview, and then we get a flashback. During the three-way battle, Urabe had found XX, the same invader who saved Ranmaru, and asked her to run away with him. Both D and Urabe, however, get distracted as they see Shippo running as fast as the boat at max speed. Actually, probably faster since he was able to catch up with the boat. With one single leap, he ends up on the boat, ready to finish off D once again. D points out that it's the same divine tool that Runa had and asks how they even got divine tools, which I mean, Negi wouldn't keep pointing that out if it wasn't going to turn into a huge plot point. We'll have to find out though. Urabe tells Shippo to stop, which Shippo just tells him to not make him think about things. I think it would have probably been better if he told him that it was the Sakurama that they were with in Beilong's nest, but he probably didn't have the time to do that. D and Shippo then go back and forth with a bit of banter as their fight begins. As quickly as it began though, Urabe swerves, throwing Shippo off of the boat. It really feels like we're back in Beilong's nest, but in a much more serious situation. Currently, there are 4 people who were in Beilong's nest technically present, even though one's back on shore. I really wonder how this will play out. D asks Urabe whose side he's on, and Urabe tells him that he'll take him back to the Neo Rangers hideout. As D is about to refuse, Urabe lets him know that XX is there. As long as they survive what comes next, it looks like XX might finally be reintroduced into the story. You might ask, why is she with the Neo Rangers? But to be fair, there are technically several executives working within the Neo Rangers, so that would be the place that she'd go. It then quickly jumps over to Shippo, who screams for the two of them to jump out of the boat as we see a huge shadow below it. Now, let's pause a moment. I could be stretching it a bit, but Shippo is showing concern for the invader he was just trying to kill. Maybe from their banter and the situation as a whole, he's realized who D is as well. Or maybe he's just being a nice dude. I don't know, the first one kind of seems off because Shippo's not that smart. Anyways, a giant fist emerges from the water, smashing the boat into pieces. D and Urabe were able to jump out first though, and as D sinks into the water, that's where we get to see the sea monster Aizome. And by that, I mean she's just chilling underwater attacking things, which is exactly what a sea monster would do. I will say though, I'm honestly surprised. I thought that the big muscular arms was a temporary buff due to Usakubo's divine tool. It, however, looks like it's a more permanent power-up, which does make her a bit more threatening as a solo actor, since they are an extension of her body and they can harm D. God, I can't wait for 149. I need to see where this goes or how this is resolved. Obviously, I don't think she's gonna finish D off, but this is such a dire situation, I can't foresee the Death Messiah's secret weapon not activating here. To run it back to my previous thoughts though about recruiting D, it looks like Urabe is trying to lure D back to the Neo Rangers hideout by using the fact that they have XX there. I know Sakurama has different goals than D though, so maybe this is just Urabe trying to get D out of a dangerous spot amongst the Rangers. Maybe this is his way of trying to save a friend, and I find that really touching. This would go along really well with the sentimentality question. And here it is though. The last video I mentioned I'd start having a segment where I responded to your questions in video. First up, we have Aaron Yeager 6210 who says, I don't understand why D said he wouldn't escape because that's lame, but then proceeded to do it. Like, what does the author want to show by this? Personally, I don't think it was really D's choice to escape. He was trying to find a safe place where he could heal up a bit, which caused him to keep moving. However, once he hit the bridge, he didn't have much of a choice. The plot forced him to run away at this point. I think this was just Negi pointing out the thought process that D has gone through before in regards to protecting people who help him. Jacob Alonzi says, boom, another great video. Much appreciated, much appreciated. My thought was the same. Are the Neo Rangers trying to recruit D? We did discuss that in this video a bit, and as much as I want to say they are, at this point, I think this is a decision being made by Urabe alone. I think Sakurama wants to save D from this situation, but I think Urabe wants him to join the Neo Rangers. Ranger Reject 149, titled Foot Soldier on the Run, Part 5, continues to amp up the excitement while also bringing us to tears. Aizome is currently winning a 1v3, and it's opening up a lot of questions when it comes to exactly what's going on with her. We do, however, come to learn exactly what the Death Messiah's warning meant in regard to foot soldiers in the water being a bad thing. The foot soldiers are unable to reconstruct themselves in water. Taking that fact and applying it to how foot soldiers are invincible, it looks like water is the perfect method to inflict as much pain as possible to foot soldiers without actually taking them out. But unfortunately for D, this is something that Aizome is completely aware of, with her claiming that she's experimented on plenty of foot soldiers. This also opens up the question of what exactly the Blue Battalion is doing up in the fortress if Aizome was able to just torture foot soldiers in her free time. Just to focus on Aizome a bit more before talking about anything else, she is really losing her mind to the thought of revenge, even convincing herself that if she takes out D, it'll bring Blue back. It's really sad to see how far she's fallen. The other thing, what in the world is going on with her powers? So she initially got her big muscular arms from Usakubo's divine tool, something that she no longer possesses. But because of that, she's also able to somehow use Umibuzo, which is the face that Blue could summon to shoot a laser. Aizome, however, doesn't need to summon anything, it just comes from her. Not to mention the fact that she seems to be getting a power-up from the divine tool similar to the one that Sosei got during the three-way battle. It's almost like the Blue Leviathan itself attached itself to her and is quickly increasing in strength. Now that they're out of the water, I'd assume we're going to start seeing more of the Blue Leviathan's abilities. During this fight, however, Shippo takes a bit of damage and Urabe helps him out of the water, hopping back in to save D. Shippo questions why he's going so far to save an invader, and Urabe simply responds with, "I want to be able to show my family that I made the right choice," showing just how far his character has come since Beilong's Nest. With him jumping back into the water though, he throws a tank of fuel at Aizome, intending to blow it up, but before he's able to, a watery hand comes out of her body to stop the shot. This is where we get to see that power up similar to Sosei's, which unfortunately is disastrous for Urabe as she punches him so hard it sends him flying out of the water. D, however, takes this chance to get behind her, setting off that second gadget we saw him get at the beginning of this volume to create a huge explosion. This ultimately gives him enough time to get out of the water where he sees Shippo, trying to wake up Urabe. God no, not my boy. Don't take Urabe from me. I can't believe you, Negi. I swear, when I find you, we're gonna have a couple of unsavory words. As D is paying attention to that though, we see Aizome creepily coming out of the water, and D tells Shippo to help Urabe and he'll take care of her. I think it's almost time. Next chapter, we have got to see D's secret weapon. He's out of divine gadgets, it's the only thing left, and I'm so ready for it. I do want to point out that I think Shippo might be realizing who D is by this point. The banter from last chapter, Urabe's insistence on helping D, and now D calling him by his name while he's in uniform. I don't care how dumb he is, he has got to realize it by now. But that's the end of the chapter, and what a phenomenal chapter it was. I believe that 150 is going to be the big chapter that we've been waiting on for a long time. I think it's time we finally get to see D's secret weapon. I am, however, extremely worried for Urabe. He gave off a lot of red flags this chapter and he might not pull through. In the early synopsis of the chapter, it said that he got punched so hard it stopped his heart. That wasn't explained in the chapter itself, but it could be a translation thing. If he doesn't make it, I might have to take a break from Ranger Reject. Just kidding, that never happened. But now it's question time. First question is from Black Fox 777. How deranged do you think Aizome is going to be when she fights D? Well, currently she's looking pretty deranged, but I think it's only going to get worse the longer this fight goes on. I'd assume by the end she's going to be dead or have completely lost her mind. Nitrox Undead asked, are the Neo Rangers based on Kamen Riders? It does look that way. Their design, along with the fact that they technically operate in a 3-man team, is very similar to Kamen Rider. Looks like Negi was trying to set up some Super Sentai versus Kamen Rider action. Jacob Balonzi. Is it Jacob Balonzi? Jacob Balonzi or Jacob Alonzi? Just want to make sure I'm saying it right. But there was technically 2 questions here. Are we going to see Peltrola next? It is completely possible, but as far as I remember, Peltrola is still inside of Exits. So who really knows? Completely depends on if he has a reason to show himself. The second question is, where do you think the Neo Rangers are getting their divine weapons from? My only assumption is that they still have access to the IRA's equipment and they were able to repurpose it. Either that, or they have an inside man in the Yellow Battalion that we may not know about yet. It could be Wendy. Negi put a little too much focus on the fact that Wendy personally gave D his divine gadget. So that could be the inside person. For what reason though? I have no idea. Ranger Reject 150 is here, and this chapter was very interesting because there's a lot of things that are like hinted at, but not specifically said. For example, the chapter starts off with Usakubo and Tokita teaming up. It's because neither of them want to see D destroyed. Think about that though. Usakubo, that makes perfect sense. Tokita not wanting D destroyed, that's kind of weird. A few videos ago, I did theorize that maybe Tokita is kind of learning and he's going to eventually come to the side of D, which we've seen it happen with multiple characters, but if it happens with Tokita, that's going to be great, especially since he's becoming a much better character. That could be it. My theory could be correct, or it could just be because Tokita wants to destroy him himself. I feel like that one kind of has a bit more behind it just because Usakubo and Tokita do start arguing later in the chapter, which, like, it's D's friend, why are you arguing with her if you're starting to come to his side? So I think this is more of a he wants to destroy D, which is why he doesn't want anyone else to do it, but at the same time, I do think he's starting to see the light. We're about to get Tokita on Team D. The next major point of the chapter, it's small, but it's something that I wanted to point out. D says he only wants to fight against heroes. He says this directly to Aizome when she questions, hey, I thought you were gonna fight, why are you running? For me, I think the way that D sees this is that for the public eye, when he's in his Duster form, he wants to be seen as a villain, which means he doesn't want to be seen taking out any villain-like characters. We've definitely seen him take out executives, so we know he doesn't actually have a problem with taking out villains. I just think in those cases, for what the public could see, he was another Ranger. So that makes sense. If he's a Duster, he doesn't want to be seen taking out villains. If he's a Ranger, he has no problem taking out villains. For D, a lot of it is all about maintaining his appearance. He doesn't want to make the Dusters seem like good guys. That hasn't really been elaborated on, but I think that's just D's sense of pride. One other small detail in this chapter is that Aizome still seems to have somewhat semblance of control. Like when she's looking for D in the mall, as the elevator door opens, she's back to her tiny arms. So she's not completely gone in the head. She's able to revert to her normal form when she doesn't want to scare the public. Back to Tokita and Usakubo though, we do get more of a conversation between them, which is about their divine tools, how Tokita's divine tool just uses a lot of his stamina, a lot of his strength, but Usakubo's has more of a drawback. Not only is her eye bleeding, but she says that the divine tool affects her mind. It's almost like she's losing her sense of self. And I wonder if this has something to do with her weird obsession with D, or if this is gonna bring Yuli Moreta back to the present. Basically, is Yuli Moreta gonna take back over Usakubo's body the more that she uses the divine tool? This is one of those ones that could go either way, but it is interesting that Negi is bringing up these details like, hey, here's this drawback. She's losing her sense of self. Where is this gonna go? Is Usakubo going to no longer be Usakubo at some point in the future? or is she gonna realize that the tool is making her obsessed with D? Another major point of the chapter is when Sakurama does eventually show up, Aizome says that if you've had a loved one killed by the invaders, you wouldn't be talking like that. And yes, I know she doesn't know it's Sakurama, but it's still ironic that that's the person she chooses to say that to. And then the big reveal, which was hinted at earlier with what D said about Aizome, that he doesn't want to fight a villain. This is something that is also said by Sakurama. A member of the Ranger Force, Aizome in this case, in the public eye right now is being seen as the villain. The Neo Rangers stepping in to stop her paints them as the heroes. Are we seeing another upset in the balance of power similar to the IRA? Is this going to be another IRA arc, but between the Neo Rangers and the Ranger Force? That brings up a lot more questions, but it really depends on how well people associate Aizome with the Ranger Force, or are they just seeing that Aizome is a separate entity at this point? It would be really easy for the Ranger Force to just say, hey, no, she's no longer a part of us. You know, she kind of ran off after the big fight, and, you know, we don't claim her. She's not ours. She's not with us. So I don't know. There's many directions that they could take that, but really it's ramping up the Ranger Force versus the Neo Rangers, and that's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And then the chapter ends with a few lines from Aizome, and it really looks like she's about to go off the deep end. She looks especially crazy in this panel where she's saying, not enough, still not enough. And I really think that she's just slowly losing her mind. Like, we already know she's losing it, but I think we're at that final point where she just snaps. And then the very last panel is the Yellow Keeper saying, this might be bad. Now, the Yellow Keeper during this entire battle has just been watching TV. He's been watching everything unfold, but I feel like he's the one who kicked everything into motion. At every point, he doesn't really seem surprised that anything is happening. It's just happening, and he's like, yeah, okay, whatever, that's happening, or, ooh, this might be bad. So I wonder when he's going to show his face. And you have to realize that during this whole fight, the only Dragon Keeper who has shown up is Noah. Obviously, we've seen Yellow watching everything unfold, and we know Chidori's preoccupied with something else, but that still leaves Blue. Like, what is Soma doing right now? Is he working his shift at Burger King right now? I need to see my boy. But that really covers everything that happens in chapter 150. I did a more sparse coverage just so, you know, you could get some more enjoyment out of reading the chapter yourself. Plus, I really just covered the major details, so everything else kind of just helps build up and accentuate around that.
Ranger Reject 151 has such a huge significance to the overall story of Ranger Reject. This goes much further than just the big surprise ending though. It does a lot for the characters and themes of this series. So, buckle in, we're going to go over each detail that makes this chapter so great. As a quick reminder, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 151 starts with a flashback from Aizome. In this flashback, a little girl trips next to her, but she doesn't save her due to the fact that she's carrying eggs and didn't want them to break. In a lot of hero-themed media, we always see one of the biggest qualifiers to being a hero is the innate ability to help others without thinking about it. Take My Hero Academia for example. It's the whole reason All Might chose to pass on One for All to Midoriya, because his body moved on its own to help someone else. That is not how Aizome works. She had to actively think about helping someone, and due to her rationalization, she let a little girl fall and end up with serious injuries. This, however, was something that Aizome was recalling to Blue, and so we continue on through that conversation, finding out that Aizome joined the Ranger Force because she wanted to learn how to be a hero. Ending this segment, Aizome says that she wants to protect the daily lives of people who are living in peace, only to immediately transition to a berserking Aizome tearing the city apart as the fight between the Neo Rangers and her continue. This flashback, the way that it was told while Aizome seems to be barely conscious, just feels like she is living in that moment while the rampage is happening. This part will continue in a bit, but we'll tackle everything in order. Next, the conversation continues between Kisu and D. Kisu admitting to D that he is an executive, and D immediately lunges to attack. We cut back to the fight between the Neo Rangers and Aizome, where Sakurama points out that she's drawing too much power from the Divine Dragon, just like Sosei did during the three-way battle. Normally, I would have skipped over this, but it's a really important line for later on. We will revisit it. We go back to D and Kisu. D is mad and screaming at Kisu to atone for the foot soldier's humiliation, but their conversation takes a different shift. Kisu admits that he felt the same way as D and asks who decided that invaders needed to fight all the time. This causes D to pause, like it activated a thought that had never occurred to him before. This particular point of the chapter is big for D. He's able to reconcile with one of the invaders. He's able to see through their eyes even for just a moment, and this is a new experience for D. The only other executive that he's really had time to talk to was Peltrola, which, as we all know, Peltrola was still aiming to take out all humans. I think this one conversation will further shape D as a character as the series continues. As a side note, we do finally get to see Kisu's power here. I honestly can't remember if we saw it during the three-way battle, but he's able to essentially influence the senses. Two normal people run up to him when D attacks him, and he says, "See not," and all they can see is black. Later on, he tells D, "Hurt not," after apologizing for his wound. So when him and Runa are fused, they can teleport and control senses, which is kind of broken. From here though, we move back to the conversation between Blue and Aizome. The super important line here is from Blue, and it sort of encases the whole ideology behind the Ranger Force. There's nothing wrong with prioritizing your own dinner over a stranger. Trying to enact justice above one's own capacity is a recipe for disaster. Just do what you can. Whether this ideology is wrong or not, it does feel selfish, especially for someone in a position of power that's supposed to help others. That leads into the second part of what he said though, trying to enact justice above one's own capacity. This is exactly what Aizome is trying to do now, but she just isn't aware that D and now the Neo Rangers are above her own capacity, and it has led to disaster. After a bit more fighting, when it looks like Aizome is on the back foot, power explodes from her, blowing off Sakurama's arm. Fortunately, it's his fake arm, so it's not too big of a deal. But then it's revealed, Aizome has transformed into something entirely different. An announcement is made that an invader has appeared and that it's a new executive. The Dragon Keepers are mobilizing. This is crazy because this brings so many more implications on how the invaders are born. Are they in fact actually humans who overuse the powers of the dragon gods to the point that they transform into an invader? Was Sosei close to transforming during the three-way battle? Does this have something to do with the original cast and the Phantom script? Just so many questions with so little answers. I know I pointed out last week how we hadn't seen Soma or Sosei III, but it does look like they're getting ready to show up to battle with one of their own turned executive. I do apologize for continuing to change things up this chapter, but it was just too big for me to try to talk about all of this unscripted.
Ranger Reject 152 is absolutely insane. So much information confirmed, D hits his breaking point, and the return of our favorite keeper. It doesn't really get much better than this, so let's dive in and discuss everything that happens this chapter and what it implies for the future of this series. As a reminder, if you're a fan of Ranger Reject, this is the channel for you, so feel free to like and subscribe. Ranger Reject 152 starts with D getting completely obliterated by the newly transformed Aizome. The interesting part about this is that it doesn't kill D, he's able to fully regenerate from it. If we look back to their first fight, Aizome is the reason that D lost his leg in the first place. She was able to actually hurt him with her buffed up arms, but now she can't. That brings up the question of what exactly changed. With the later confirmation, we learn from Yellow that invaders are made from humans. We'll discuss this later, but the key point here is that divine weapons are able to kill invaders, but once a human turns because of a divine weapon, they are unable to kill the invaders. Could this be something to keep them from infighting? Basically, they can't technically turn on each other since they can't finish each other off, keeping the Ranger Force in the heroic position. The fight, however, continues, and as Aizome is about to begin torturing D, we finally get the return of the Chocobull fusion, which is still just the coolest character design ever. Freeing D, they begin to fight Aizome, leaving Sakurama and D with a chance to discuss everything that's happening. Unfortunately, as Sakurama is making a few conclusions out of the situation, their conversation is interrupted by Yellow. As Sakurama questions him, we get direct confirmation from Yellow's mouth that the invaders are in fact created from humans and that the divine dragons have the ability to warp reality. Later in this chapter, this is explained a bit more, but it makes you question just how powerful the divine weapons are and how the Ranger Force came into possession of that power. We do, however, learn that the surgery that the Keepers get are to allow humans to use multiple divine weapons. If they are wielded by someone who doesn't have the surgery, they become an invader. Let's slow down on that point though, because there's something else to address here. While on the surface it may look like Aizome was only using one divine weapon power, we've seen her use 2 abilities and we've seen a third from someone else. If you recall, Aizome received this power by using Usakubo's divine replica. Usakubo's divine replica uses a power that looks just like Yellow's arrows, which may be why he reacted the way that he did when she defended D in this chapter. Aizome's arm growth could be attributed to Sukuna Bikono no Kami, Chidori's ability that allows him to grow, and then she uses Umibozu. It's completely possible that Usakubo's divine replica allows her to utilize multiple of the divine weapon's powers, but as of right now, Usakubo only uses one. We'll talk about that bit more in a second. Sakurama confirms that the Neo Rangers have 2 collaborators, and we see a panel showing Sosei and a mysterious character who has their back turned to us. Sakurama tells Yellow that they are both someone that he knows and tells him that the Sosei clone they tried to get rid of, but doesn't say who the second one is. On first glance, you might think he's referring to himself, but honestly that doesn't look like Sakurama's head from the back. His hair is typically more spiky, and he has a little alfalfa strand of hair sticking up on the top. With that being said, who is this mysterious collaborator? I know I theorized before that it could be Wendy helping them, but they don't have the headpiece on in that picture. I'm assuming it's someone from Yellow or the Kuroko, since it's most likely the person who gets the Neo Rangers their divine weapons. Could it be one of the characters that was in Beilong's nest with D? I guess we'll have to wait until that eventual reveal. One of the biggest parts of this chapter, however, alludes back to the Phantom script. The Dragon Keepers, the Ranger Force, and the Invaders are all a part of a story created by Guji Productions. This tells us something though. Yellow isn't at the top of the food chain. He's actively helping with the show, but he isn't in control of it. How though are they able to control the actions of all 3 of those parties in order to fit within their narrative? Is this a part of the power of the divine weapons? You'd assume that if they have the ability to warp reality, controlling such a large amount of people is possible. However, this leads into Yellow getting ready to take out D, but Usakubo jumps in to save him. This is what I was talking about earlier though. Yellow says, "Dear me, that power is," and then stops. I feel like there's a lot more going on with Usakubo's divine replica. This, however, means that she might be in danger. As mentioned earlier, wielding multiple weapons is dangerous. What if that feeling of losing herself is her beginning to turn into an invader, only being held back by Yuli Moreta inside of her? It's something to think about, but this might be a huge red flag for Usakubo. I, however, think my favorite parts of this chapter is D's reaction to all of the information he's learned, and I'm going to rant a bit. I've seen a lot of people complain about D's character. They say that he's the weakest part of the story because he doesn't have any motivations, but I find this asinine. We are constantly reminded of D's motivations. What we see though is basically a young child or teenager who's been sheltered, experiencing the world for the first time. Of course he's confused. This part specifically really solidifies how great of a character D is though. How can you not sympathize with D's story and how it's all about him breaking free? Which makes this revelation for him so crushing. No matter what D has done, he's never been free, and every decision he's made has been a part of someone else's script. It's absolutely devastating, and seeing how he reacts to it just makes it hit that much harder. Rant over though. The chapter ends with Papa Chidori finally showing up in the story, and he seems to have learned quite a bit since the last time we saw him, telling D that it's time for them to put an end to this botched script. And I really hope we're going to get a scene like Yuji and Nanami versus Mahito. I just need to see D and Chidori absolutely jumping Yellow. That man has had it coming for a long time. That's it. Those are the events of chapter 152, and now I'm impatiently waiting for 153. There were a lot of reveals, and I feel like we're super close to getting a lot of conclusive answers before we get hit by another huge twist. Ranger Reject 154 stacks the emotions and reaffirms the fact that D is such an amazing protagonist. This chapter really sticks to the personality of the individual characters involved, and that's what makes it so engaging, specifically when it comes to D, Sakurama, and Chidori. But hey, as a side note, Me, Yato Plays, the Greek Weeb, and Nox recently started a podcast where we'll be covering a lot of manga that's currently out, including Ranger Reject. If you want to hear some in-depth analysis and predictions for Ranger, as well as those other manga bounced between a good group of dudes, why not check out our new channel, Panel Focus? A link will be in the description. Chapter 154 begins by continuing the conversation between those three characters. D is obviously still upset because he believes he's still stuck in someone else's script, desperate to prove that his decisions are his own. There's something we'll discuss later, as Sakurama does mention it, but even last chapter it bothered me how Shinya said that everything was planned around D's appearance, and while that may be true for the moment, I don't believe it's possible for D specifically to be a part of someone's script. As I said though, we'll go more in detail with that later. However, we finally get to see Suzukiri again, but it looks like her and Chidori's time is coming to an end. They aren't fighting anymore, which is a good thing, but I am curious as to what else they talked about. I also find it a bit strange that Suzukiri didn't have any words for D when she had the ability to talk to him or at least pass the message along to him. Maybe she feels bad that she dropped out of the fight while things continue to amp up on D's side. I guess we'll have to wait for their eventual reunion before we get that kind of information. This part continues to enforce how much Chidori cares about D as he continues to offer him advice. Chidori tries to remind D of his ambitions and why he came down to the surface, asking if he plans to keep dancing in the palm of someone else's hand. It's a great moment between these two, even if it is short-lived. Chidori offers a plan up to get D out of this situation. If Sakurama pretends to strike down D, it would give good publicity to the Neo Rangers, which is the opposite of what was expected, and it would free D from this script. We take a second to cut to different fights before this conversation continues though. While Shinya battles Usakubo, he reinforces my earlier thoughts on her Divine Tool replica, that if she overuses it, she'll end up like Aizome, but that still brings into question how it would react with Yuli Moreta inside of her. Would it bring Yuli Moreta back out? Would it give her a power boost, or would it create a new executive altogether? I'm assuming the fact that Usakubo already has an invader inside of her gives her some type of natural immunity to the Divine Tool replica's effect. We do, however, know that it isn't complete protection against it, as we've heard from Usakubo the effects that it has on her. However, it does look like Shinya is trying to push her to use the power more and more as he invokes his Divine Tool, which this panel is really cool looking. It's a transformation similar to what we saw Sosei do previously. Shinya is cloaked in aura and he receives a crown. It also looks like he's levitating off of the ground with energy under his feet. That combined with using a bow seems to be a broken combo, as he can stay back and just fire at Usakubo from the air. The one part to point out is the black cloak he's now wearing, which we have seen before. This was the ability that Nagisa Chabatake used during the three-way battle called Hono Ikazuchi no Okami. These are thunderclouds that essentially let him harness the power of thunder, so it'll be interesting to see that infused with his current powers. From here, it switches over to Hisui and Tokido, whose fight is interrupted by the new Sosei clone. We get to really see just how different he is here, as he tells Tokido and Hisui to shake hands and be good friends, going as far as saying, "I can't believe they'd attack my cute junior like this," when we know how the previous Sosei thought of Tokido's looks. That, however, is interrupted by Aizome punching Red with her invisible fist, telling him to get lost. So it does seem she definitely retained some of her personality. If she didn't, she'd have no reason to hold a grudge against Red, but she does remember how he treated her and the death of Blue. I'll be honest though, it looks like Red is dying here. He gets off one last line, but the paleness in his eyes really looks like he's leaving the earth right now. I'm curious to see if he'll jump back up from this, or if there's something that associates power to personality within the Sosei clones, like the kinder they are, the weaker they are. It'd be really interesting to try to figure out why that would happen. We cut back to the conversation between Chidori, D, and Sakurama though. Sakurama agrees to take out D if there's no other way, but asks D if he's okay with that, telling him that it's his decision, telling D that he is the eye of the storm. Everything is orchestrated around him and that none of it would be possible without him, which brings me back to my earlier thought. While D may be a part of a script, the script has to adjust for him being there. That's how this entire story has been. D is the wrench in everyone's plan. He's unpredictable, and that's what makes him such a phenomenally written character. Everyone has to adjust for his presence, and there's no way to know how a battle of this size will turn out. We've seen it over and over again. And it all started with him not returning to the tower during that first battle. The Rangers didn't expect that. They didn't expect him to steal Red's weapon or even kill a Sosei clone. They didn't expect him to kill Blue or be a major part of the reason that they won against the Death Messiah. Even if you know about him, he is an unpredictable variable in any hypothesis. That's why he's the Eye of the Storm and why Sakurama says that this battle belongs to D. Chidori agrees to this, and D lets them know that he denies that plan and will come up with his own, that he won't dance in the palm of Chidori either. This is a fair statement. While Chidori is ultimately kind to D and fills a mentor-type beat, it's easy to see him also using D to take down the Ranger Force, even if unintentional. D, however, plans to end this by giving them a great bad ending where everyone loses, and that's got me curious. How is he going to do that? It's safe to assume that we'll see what power the Death Messiah gave him next chapter, and he'll use that to enact his plan. I am curious because we'll have to see how he plans on ending every fight that's happening, including escaping from Aizome. How does this end safely for all parties involved and to where D can escape? I guess we'll have to wait for the next chapter to see exactly where this is going, and I really can't wait. Ranger Reject 154 is here, and this chapter really piques the old curiosity bone. I don't know what a curiosity bone is, specifically in regards to what D could be planning, but it is really nice to see a lot of our favorites coming together for this plan. We also get to see that Hisui has some problems with the Ranger Force as well, which could better explain why she's willing to work with the Neo Rangers. Honestly, that's really the last piece of the puzzle that we needed, as we had Chidori, D, and Usakubo against the Ranger Force, but didn't have a definitive answer for Hisui. So it looks like the Green Battalion is in it for the long run, which is great to know. On that note though, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe. Also, go check out the podcast that I'm a part of, Panel Focus, where we'll discuss a lot of manga, including Ranger Reject. I know you already get that covered within these videos, but I feel like it's a lot more in-depth as ideas can get bounced around and discussed between multiple people. On that note, let's get back into the chapter. Ranger Reject 154 continues with the fight between Usakubo and Shinya, with Usakubo taking a pretty devastating blow. Hisui and the Executive Fusion, we really need an official name for this character, do step in to save her. But I wanted to point out something Shinya said. So, you don't even fear death. Faith truly is a cruel thing. This seems to be an inescapable cycle that Usakubo's character has been stuck in, and I'm really hoping that she'll snap out of this. Sacrificing yourself for a friend is a pretty typical shonen trope. She would do this for Yakushi, and now she's doing it for D. I personally want to see Usakubo blossom into her own character though, someone who doesn't revolve her identity around whichever character she's attached to the hip to. Just my personal thoughts on that. The broadcast, however, continues as the director receives a message telling him that Foot Soldier D has requested him personally. The broadcast does seem like background noise for the most part. It recalls events that we've seen and asks all the questions that we ask, but it does set up what the script wants, how they want this televised event to turn out, and that leads into D's masterful plan, which we'll discuss later. Sakurama extends an invite to D to come to the Neo Rangers hideout. This, however, isn't done in a way to get D to join the Neo Rangers. I believe that Sakurama knows D well enough to know that he's not going to abandon his current path. This is done in order to inform D of the purpose of the Ranger Force and the executives, the reason that D was created, which shows that Sakurama had an inkling of an idea or even outright knew all of this information, but Shinya simply confirmed it to be true. The question is, how did he find out all of this information? At this point, we can assume it was Sosei. That would probably be the best bet. Hisui enters the conversation with D and Sakurama, having been informed of D's plan from Chidori. This is where we get the confirmation that all of Green Battalion is against the Ranger Force. Hisui states that she has her own grievances with the Ranger Force. What is that grievance though? Hisui is a smart character. She's most likely figured out everything wrong with the Ranger Force on the surface. Either that, or when Chidori was letting her know about the plan, he also let her know what D and Sakurama were told by Shinya. But on top of that, I believe it'll have something to do with Ishikawa, the unranked ranger who died in Beilong's nest, the same one who saved a young Hisui. This, however, cuts back to Chidori and Suzukiri, as Chidori states that the adults should work in the background. It honestly sucks that so much of their interaction was off screen. It would have been nice to see more of that, but for the moment, I'll believe that Negi has something cooking that will be a surprise to us later on. D begins to draw attention to himself, diverting the broadcast, Shinya's and Aizome's attention to him. Aizome rushes towards D but gets intercepted by Red. With that being said, I'll admit when I'm wrong. It looks like she just took Red by surprise and now he's back in the fight. D's plan has been set up though. It's too late. Sakurama and Hisui come running at him from two different directions. The studio notices what's happening and panically requests that they cut to commercial, but it's too late. The script has been broken. D found a way to turn this into a lose-lose situation as he takes a hit from Sakurama and Hisui at the same time, scattering into the wind. The chapter ends with a frustrated studio head claiming that the ending was ruined. The public's perception of this is that the episode was boring. D's plan worked. Nobody won. But what happens next? This appears to be the end of the arc. I'm not sure where else they could take this specific storyline if it was to continue, but I'm honestly so excited to see what happens next. Chidori appears ready to mobilize. All of Green Battalion will be together in this fight. Usakubo might have hit a few moments for her to start questioning herself within this arc. How will the introduction of a new executive affect the world? And will D head to the Neo Rangers to find out why he was created? This arc opened up a lot of interesting questions, and it really does look like we're moving closer to the end game. That, however, is all for this video. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. Otherwise, peace.